Hi everyone, I'm John Schulte, and I've been a church consultant, pastor, professor for 30 years, and I have a passion for studying the church and thinking about how churches can become vital and healthy and grow. And so I'm just beginning to share some of the information that I've learned and maybe be helpful in giving people tools about assessing their church. And today, for just a quick about 10 minutes or so, we're going to be looking at adaptability. How adaptable is your church? And so this is what that's all about. And if you're not interested, great, you can move on. But if not, hopefully this will give you some of the tools you might need to make an assessment on your church. And I always appreciate continuing the discussion. So if you like to email me, then send your ideas or thoughts so we can keep developing this. And send that to me, or if you got comments, put them down in the comment section, even if you see this on the YouTube channel for my ministry. But let's just talk about that for a minute, and I'm talking really about adaptivity. What's the capacity for the church to be adaptable? And then I made just a little bit of a definition to help us out to be thinking about it. So. What we'll be working on, so we're all on the same page. And so what I'm talking about is the capacity of a church to handle certain things, like the change required to reach new ministry. And of course, right away we see change. So adaptability has a lot to do with change. And so when new ministry opportunities arrive, how adaptable is your church at being able to meet and take advantage of the new ministry opportunities that come up? Also, to manage the capacity of our church to manage unknown variables. When things you haven't planned for come up, how adaptable is your church to be able to manage those things? For example, COVID-19, moving from in-person worship to online. And now as we're moving through this whole pandemic and it's slowly coming to an end, and we're now talking about, or hopefully you are talking about, should be talking about, what is it going to look like when we return and how are we going to make that transition? So that's an adaptive capacity. What kind of capacity do we have to adapt to changing back to in-person worship, as well as maybe hanging on to our online presence as well, which would probably be a good idea. So, as a lot of people are saying, that's what's going to be happening in the church. It's going to be both now online and in person. So both of those things are going to be happening. And technology is playing a large part in making that happen. And how adaptable is our church to be able to do that? And then, of course, the big one, to deal with conflictive issues that come up in the church. How adaptable are we to deal with those conflictive issues? Now, to help make an assessment, I'm putting it all on what I call an adaptability continuum. And so that's where you are here, and you go through each of these and you say, okay, how can we handle the change required to reach new ministry opportunities? How are we with that? And you want to try to mark where you are on the scale from low to high. You have very low adaptability, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, or you have very high ability to adapt to different things for changes and to reach new ministry opportunities. And then also, and all rotates around change, of course, the managing unknown variables. Where are we as a church in this continuum from low to high to be able to manage unknown variables that come our way? And I think a lot of people found out that they were kind of low on that adaptability scale when they hit COVID-19. And then, there were also churches that were, kind of surprised themselves, and the Spirit worked, and they made that a change, and they did very, very well at it. So that's exciting to see. And then, of course, to deal with conflictive issues. How do we deal with conflictive issues? How does that happen? All right, so when I'm talking about low adaptability continuum, I'm talking about churches who are unable or unwilling to change in response to consequences or opportunities or potential problems that come their way. So they have a very low probability of being able to adapt to any consequence that might happen with the decisions that they've made or opportunities that come their way. They just can't seem to jump on them and go after them, or even potential problems that develop once they've made certain decisions. How can they adapt to that? And so on this side of the scale, it's churches who have problems with that a little lower. On this side of the scale, which is higher, it's churches that change constantly, so much so that they cause significant confusion within the congregation. So you have the extreme on this end. And obviously, like in any continuum, you probably wouldn't want to have your church either to the extreme low, where they can't or unable or unwilling to make any change at all the way to the extreme high, where there's just constant change all the time and there's confusion and nobody knows really what's happening. So that probably wouldn't be very good to put that way. But somewhere you need to be on the continuum, and in a way that provides health for your congregation, and out of that comes growth. Growth both in terms of quantitative growth of people, but also qualitative growth in their relationship to the Lord, the Christ, and being a disciple of Christ. So all of that has to be thought about and thinking about that. Now, wherever you choose to place your church on this adaptability continuum, there is certain things that you're going to have to do dependent upon where they are. So, for example, if you're on the lower side, if you assess your church and you say, well, I think our church is more on the lower side of adaptability. It's either unable to make the certain changes that we need to do these things, or they're unwilling to make those changes. So I would put my church more on this side. Then to help move the church forward and go through that, you're going to have greater time needed to bring about change. So if you're going into a ministry in a church that is lower on the adaptability continuum, you're going to have to realize that ministry is going to be a long-term ministry. You're going to be there for a while before you see all those great visionary things that you want or that you see down the line. You're going to have to be very patient. You're going to have to work very slow to bring them up this continuum a little bit, to move them forward towards greater ministry and more vitality and health that will bring about growth. Of course, if you're way up here and your church has been doing a lot of things, changing and moving and so forth, that will be less time needed, of course, to bring change that might help you reach the vision that God has given you, right? As a pastor or as a leader in the church, whatever the case might be. So then you don't have to do it's not going to take you as much time to make those necessary changes. Now, the other thing involved in this is not only time and realizing where your church is. So like I said, if your church is lower, you know this is going to be a longer ministry. I'm going to have to take my time in making that happen and win people and be a change agent over to the vision that God has given me. Or if you're over here, it will be less time to do that, and you can probably accomplish a little bit more in that ministry. But there's also a certain degree of communication that happens. And oftentimes in a church that's lower on the adaptability scale, there is less a degree of communication needed, because, of course, nothing's changing that much. So there doesn't have to be a lot of communication. The communication that you want to continue to do is encouragement, vision casting, support where they are, build them up in terms of their own process of feeling good about themselves, but also reminding them about, what is the vision, what are we as a church here to do, those kinds of things. Just working with them. But you're not really bringing a lot of communication about different change. And that grows as you get more, the faster you begin to move up the adaptability continuum, you get more and more communication that's needed because things are really beginning to happen. And the biggest problem that I've found with churches is that they don't communicate enough. And I know a lot of people go, well, we have a newsletter, and we send out an email, and we make phone calls, and we've got put mailings out and all this kind of stuff, and all that's great. And I think all of that's needed. We make announcements in church and so forth, but you always can communicate more. That's always the biggest issue in the end, where people say, well, there wasn't enough communication. So over-communicate. Do much more than you even thought you should do to get that vision idea across of where you are and where you want to go and how you can move up that scale. Now, in this process, of course, that's a lot of work. If a church is farther down here, it's a lot of work to begin to move them up. It's a work for the church, it's work for the pastors, it's work for the leadership team. And a lot of times you can burn any of those out. You can burn the pastor out, you can burn your leadership team out, and you can burn the church out. So there is a finesse that you have to help the church move forward, but also take a breath, move forward, take a breath, enjoy and celebrate the movement that you do get. You get one tick up here, celebrate that, that's exciting. And then you regroup and you move again, one more tick up and so forth. It's a process of taking your time to be able to do that. And I think that's an important key. It's not always easy. I know a lot of churches where, people have moved and they keep pushing and pushing, and the church and what you're creating becomes more conflictive, right? And so less adaptability then, and you get stalled out. And you don't want to be doing that. So you have to find what I call the sweet spot. You got to understand the church, listen to the people, listen to your leadership, and figure out, how far can they be pushed to grow? You got to have them outside their boundaries sometimes, because that's the only way we can grow. But we also know that we can push too hard, and then the reverse happens and you decline. So there is a sweet spot in this process as you're moving through it. And I think one of the things, where's the sweet spot for you? And one of the ways that you can figure out what your sweet spot is and where your sweet spot is in terms of this adaptability continuum is through your leadership. So work well with your leadership, get to know them, spend time with them, help them understand this process, and let them be a part of saying, hey, where's our sweet spot? Talk with the leadership. Hey, what do you think? We did all this past year. We've really been moving. Is the church exhausted? Does it need to take a breath? Do we need to celebrate some things? I know there's a lot of times when everyone, staff, the church, the congregation, we're all working for a certain goal, and it's great. And then we reach it, and what happens? We just got, another goal. And then we just start going after that, and everybody's throwing it, and finally people are exhausted. And sometimes you just have to pause and celebrate and say, wow, look what the Lord's done. Look how the Spirit's moved. Look at the people that are coming to know the Lord. Look how we're growing in our discipleship with the Lord, all that, so that becomes a part of it. And I think your leadership can help you in the process of understanding, where your sweet spot is, and to keep it moving forward, but not, overshoot your headlights, so to speak. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot more stuff we can talk about and bringing about change. But I just wanted to go over this with you for a minute in terms of understanding the overview of the adaptability continuum, and maybe get you thinking about how adaptable your church is, where it might be in this continuum, and then be aware of how can I move it along towards vitality, health, and growth in a way that brings everybody with me. All right, I hope that was helpful. Again, if you've got other ideas and comments, please share them here or send me an email. Love to keep the conversation going. I appreciate you sharing with me, and thank you for listening to me as I share with you. I'll see you next time.